Hi everybody, it's Nancy Scott with Masterpiece Quilting, and I am so excited today to share with you my Blossom wall hanging. I've got two versions of the wall hanging. This was the original one, and it's just this easy, simple 21 by 21 inch wall hanging that is perfect for this time of year, right after the holidays. All the decorations are down and the house is just looking blah. I don't know what other word to describe it with, but it just needs something. So if you're in an area where it's kind of gray and kind of dreary outside right now, which is what's happening in my life, it is so refreshing to have just some bright colors. Doesn't have to be a lot, but just some beautiful bright colors to brighten up the room. So this was the original version that I made several years ago. It is with Island Batik fabrics, and I decided I wanted to do a remake of it. And this is the remake that I finished up over the holidays. Very similar in their colorways, but going with a more neutral background, giving it just a little bit more pop of color. So we've got the Blossom is available as a kit, and I've got the contents of the kit laid out here for you. We've got the background and the border with the binding. Have pre-cut 5-inch squares for you in all of the bright colors that go in the border section here. And then we've got the applique pieces, the pinks, the golds, the greens, and then also the terracotta for the vase. So we've got all the fabrics included in the kit along with the print pattern. So that's available all together. The only thing that you will need to provide is your fusible interfacing that has a paper release on it. That is not in the kit, but all of the fabrics to make the quilt top, including the binding and the paper pattern, are included in the kit. If you've already got all the fabrics yourself, if your stash is plenty and you can say, hey, I can just make that right out of my stash, I've got both print and PDF digital download versions of the pattern available in my Etsy shop. One quick note for you. If you're just doing the standalone pattern, either print or PDF version, all of the diagrams and the instructions are written for this version. With the kit, I went ahead and re-imaged everything to match the kit. So if you're buying the kit, you get the pattern that matches the kit. If you're just buying the standalone pattern, you're getting this one. But I know you guys are smart and that you can make sure that you're getting the base cut out of whatever fabric you want to cut the base out of. Make all your flowers different colors. They don't have to be yellow and pink. They can be red and purple. They can be 4 different colors. Whatever color makes you happy, whatever scraps you have will work beautifully for this. So this is Blossom, and it is available now, and I am so excited to share it to you. So I'm going to drop my needle right here, and I can see that I am just on the edge of the applique, and we're going to start stitching. And I'm going to slow this down just so it doesn't drive anybody bonkers watching it. Okay, that's a little too slow. There we go. And I'm aiming so that the right hand side is catching just off the applique, and then we're taking our stitch to the left just inside. And as I'm coming up here to this corner, we're going to get ready to pivot. Take one bite over, one bite out, because we always want to pivot off the edge. My machine will allow me to take a stitch manually here to advance that just around that corner. Typically, I'm going to be stitching faster than this, but it's good to go slow just to get used to how your machine stitches. And I want to make sure I'm all the way through the stitch sequence here. So we go, before I pivot, back in. And that inside curve I'm going to do manually, advancing one stitch at a time, because I want to pivot right after that. There we go, one more pivot. Going to speed up just a little bit. And I'm using my hands just to kind of spin the fabric under the needle. Going to stop, pivot right here. This was my first tail. I want to make sure he's out of the way. We're going to stitch across him to secure him, but I want to make sure he's out of the way. And let me come up. We have overlapped our first stitch, so now I'm going to do a lock stitch to secure and then trim with my thread cutters. And there we go. Some beautiful applique. I've got the Blossom Wall hanging quilted now and trimmed, ready for binding. And I want to talk just a little bit about the trimming process before I put on the binding. So I'm going to step in here really close. And what I want you to notice is that I have trimmed 1/4 of an inch past the edge. And the reason that I did that, when I get ready to put my binding on, which is right here, it's cut at 2.5 inches. I'm going to machine stitch it on, but I want to make sure that we're not losing these points that are right here, right here. So by trimming out 1/4 of an inch, that gives me enough wiggle room. I'm going to stitch the back, wrap to the front, and then I can line up the edge of that binding right here so we're not losing those points. So all the way around, I've trimmed out 1/4 of an inch. It also let me take care of any areas that were just a little wonky. Sometimes when I'm basting in, you don't always get everything perfectly square. So we're talking less than 1/16 of an inch, but it does let me kind of tidy up those edges, square up my corners down here. I was off a little bit on that bottom corner, so I've got a little extra batting right there, and that's going to end up making sure that that corner looks perfectly square when we get finished. We're going to continue stitching down along the next side. I do not use a walking foot when I'm putting on my binding. I use just a traditional presser foot and have extended my stitch length to a 3.0, so just slightly longer than what I typically would do piecing with. As I'm doing the binding, I'm bringing the binding from the back to the front, and I'm going to top stitch it in place. I've got matching thread to the binding in the top, and as you can see, I am lining up this edge of the binding, the fold right here, so that it is right on the points, because we want to preserve those points. And if you remember, I trimmed this out an extra 1/4 of an inch, so that is what is allowing me to control exactly where the folded edge of the binding lands. I've got my stitch length elongated just a little bit, have used the needle positioner to scoop my needle exactly where I want it in the center, so I've got even pressure on both the binding and the quilt. And just using my fingers to hold everything. I'm just gently folding the binding over, making sure that it covers all of my basting stitches, both on the long arm and the seam that I sewed the binding on with. And I'm just working basically from half square triangle to quarter square triangle to quarter square triangle, just a short section at a time. I'm going to miter out my corner here and then continue on my way. If you want to learn more about machine binding techniques, I invite you to check out my Learn to Machine Bind Your Quilts DVD. It's an online class that's available through Annie's Craft Store, and I also have DVDs available in my Etsy shop.